Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More archaeologists unearth evidence of strange bone ritual after Iron Age battle in Denmark. Researchers at Archaeologists, an archaeological site in Denmark, have unearthed thousands of bones in a dig that helps shed light on the aftermath of a bloody Iron Age battle that happened about 2,000 years ago. The bones reportedly provide unequivocal evidence that people at the time had systematic and deliberate ways of clearing battlefields, chopping up and reassembling bones in what seems to be a highly organized, and quite strange, post-battle ritual. Analysis of the remains, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences (PNAS), led researchers to conclude that the wetland area of Archaeologists in the Jutland Peninsula in Denmark was the site of a large and violent battle in which hundreds of mostly young men were killed. The bones show a high frequency of unhealed trauma from sharp-edged weapons, which, together with finds of military equipment, suggests that the find is of martial character, researchers said. It is suggested that most of those who died had very little previous fighting experience, as they did not have any scars from previous sharp force trauma, cuts and blows from weapons like lances, swords or axes. After the battle, victims' corpses were evidently left out in the open to be gnawed on by wild animals for up to a year, before their skeletons were systematically dismembered and thrown into a nearby lake. The collections of bones, ossicocci, pelvic bones, threaded onto a stick, and cuts and scraping marks, provide evidence of the systematic treatment of the human corpses after the time of exposure, researchers said. The finds are interpreted as the remains of an organized and possibly ritually embedded clearing of a battlefield, including the physical manipulation of the partly skeletonized bones of the deceased fighters and subsequent deposition in the lake. Ferocious Germanic tribes setting the scene for their findings, the researchers describe the period from the 1st century BC to the 1st century AD, the time when the battle occurred, as an era of huge change in northern Europe. The expanding Roman Empire was causing huge changes throughout the continent, as attempts to push the boundaries of the empire caused major political unrest. The historic defeat of 3 Roman legions in the Teutoburg Forest in Lower Saxony and North Rhine-Westphalia in AD 9 was a significant turning point, that was followed by a continued push by Roman forces into Germania. At this time in history, military relations between Rome and Northern Europe were a key aspect of European political development, and the Romans seemingly knew the wrath of their enemies to the north all too well. The ferocity of the Germanic tribes and peoples and their extremely violent and ritualized behavior in the aftermath of warfare became a trope in the Roman accounts of their barbaric northern neighbors. Researchers say, there has been little archaeological evidence to back up these accounts of ferocious warfare to date. However, with only a few sites in Germany yielding any evidence of post-battle human remains, this has limited the possibility of in-depth analysis of the warmongering ways of the Germanic tribes and their opponents, until now. These new archaeological investigations have uncovered a comprehensive collection of human remains, with clear evidence of conflict-related trauma. Researchers say they can be interpreted as the earliest finds of a large contingent of fighters from a defeated army from the early 1st century AD, allowing us to address central questions regarding the character of the fighting groups and post-battle activities, including the possibilities of ritual aspects in the treatment of the dead. Thousands of bones found in the marshes. Researchers working in the 75-acre marshland site known as Archaeologists, in the Alerup River Valley in eastern Denmark, have so far exhumed 2,095 bones from at least 82 individuals. Based on their findings to date, the team, led by Professor Mads Karla Holst from Aarhus University, estimate at least 380 people, mostly young adult males, were involved in a large-scale armed conflict. The traces of trauma are likely to reflect injuries sustained in combat in which pointed weapons were used, causing more damage to the soft tissue than the bones, whereas large sharp force lesions of the cranium point to the use of weapons with a sharp edge. Researchers said, this lesion pattern is consistent with the weaponry, lances, swords, and perhaps axes, and combat technique of the Germanic tribes in the centuries around the turn of the millennium. Animal tooth marks on the bones show that the remains were exposed to scavenging animals for 6 months to a year, and became at least partly skeletonized in this time. Cut marks on the bones further suggest that there was some form of treatment of the remains after battle, possibly a separation of some of the bones that were still held together by ligaments. There were very few large cranial fragments or skulls at the site, which also suggests the deliberate selection and possibly crushing of particular body parts. There is no evidence from Professor Holst and his team to prove who killed this Germanic tribe all those years ago, and whether it was a Roman legion bent on revenge for earlier defeats. What the site does show is signs of a significant battle where a group of, perhaps highly inexperienced, Germanic tribesmen were recruited from a large area to oppose their foe, but were gruesomely slaughtered. It also demonstrates, researchers conclude, that the conflict was extremely violent, and that bizarre ritual activities took place some time after the battle. There is evidence, at this site, of the systematic treatment of the human corpses, including stripping of bodies, disarticulation of bones, crushing of crania, and arrangement of body parts, points to a new form of post-battle activities, with implications for the interpretation of contemporary battlefields and later ritual traditions with regard to depositions of the spoils of war.